Greetings, St. Thomas. This is Forrest Jackson again, coming to you with discussion 5, discussing issues surrounding the globalization of business. Got a couple of references I'll share with you before we start. Child from 2015, Organizing Contemporary Principles and Practice. Dr. P. Gleason on how does globalization affect an organization's business approach. Another one of our texts, McDonald, 2015, Business Ethics, and Konstantin Pazaris from 2006, Business of Globalization and the Globalization of Business. I love this topic because I've spent a lot of time around the planet in various places. So I'll start with a quick definition that Dr. Gleason gives in stating that there's a difference between globalization and internationalization. And internationalization is increasing the importance, or basically trying to produce international trade, develop international relations, treaties, alliances, and the such. Globalization actually refers to what he calls economic integration, trying to get one economy or more of a global economy as a result of free trade. So the two go hand in hand, but the two are distinctly different according to several other authors. Globalization is also often defined as a worldwide effort towards economic, financial, and communication, as well as cultural integration. And I'll give you an example in a few minutes about a cultural integration or cultural challenges that are faced with international businesses, whether they're dealing amongst each other or even internally with themselves. When you think about human resources, you've got to understand the culture in which you are supporting. Konstantin Pazaris actually wrote an article in the business of globalization and globalization of business, and talked about how far back globalization goes. And he mentioned the Babylonian Empire, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were actually utilized for trade, shipping lanes. Alexander the Great conquest over Europe and Africa, and as far east as into India. He goes on to talk about how far and how fast we've come from basic wiring and electricity to pulse power now. The internal combustion engine that was invented many years ago, and now we're using electric engines that produce lightning speeds. From coal-fired trains to bullet trains, and Alexander Graham Bell with the telephone, to technology today where I can reach out and grab, well, I'm recording on a cell phone. So pretty crazy technology. In order to be successful in this global world, we've got to be able to keep up with technology because it is moving at the speed of light, literally. Dr. Gleason goes back and talks a little bit about just in such a short period of time, we've gone from developing cars to there was a time when importing a foreign car was supposed to be exotic. It was supposed to be this fancy thing, and now you can get any car you want in the world from anywhere in the world delivered to your doorstep, usually within a matter of a few days. But Dr. Gleason brings up a very interesting point when he talks about in global businesses. There's always a political implication and always a political aspect that needs to be considered when making decisions. And in the United States, we divide those political alignments or those political arguments around whether you're blue or red. And so Gleason discussed the current administration and the tariffs that we have placed on other countries, and how that actually impacts local business owners. How even if you're in a red state or a blue state, how China, for example, can place, not necessarily embargo, but place restrictions on goods that they may require from states that might be of a color that they disagree with, whether they're red or blue. And then the example Gleason uses, pig farming. I think we've all agreed, because we've posted on it for the last 6 weeks, when we talk about the incredible ethical violations that we faced as a result of our cyberspace and technology And people, in fact, I think Dr. Long mentioned it in his discussion or in his Zoom the other day about how we become immune or blind to not seeing someone's face in front of us when we're discussing. So we post these radical ideas and radical concepts out in cyberspace because we don't have anybody that's going to argue with us directly. So I guess it makes us feel strong. We've seen how fast news travels. Look at what Facebook and social media, the challenges that they have faced. The fake news or the media producing or sending out uncorroborated news feeds, and people make decisions based off of that. And if we're making decisions here in the United States, these same decisions are going to be made around the world because we have so many global connections. Pizarro talks about, he uses this phrase of the trilogy of interactive forces. And what he means by that is there's a globalization, trade liberalization, and the revolution in information technology and communication. Talks further about the entrepreneurial requirements, and for practical purposes, these international or even national borders that we once used to deem as these boundaries, they're gone with globalization, international trade, and so much happening in cyberspace. There are no borders. From our textbook, Child actually talks about we need to really understand these cultural differences in order to manage them, particularly when we are managing the differences between cultures where we may have employees in different pockets around the world. He goes on to talk about the multinational enterprises and how, from my perspective, I've seen a resume might look different from someone from a different culture or a different nation. It might say the same thing, but it might not mean the same thing based on their culture, based on their cultural differences, based on the expectations that a company or an individual may have. McDonald discusses international codes of conduct kind of along those same lines, and the big difference between relativism and absolutism. Relativism is what he calls, what she calls, the adaptation of cultural expectations within a normative internal culture, as opposed to absolutism, which they talk about universal expectations regardless of cultural differences. So let me give you two quick examples that I remember just in my own personal dealings international. The first one is, if you're in the Middle East, whether you are a member of a company and you are part of HR or you're trying to do business with them, there's a couple things that you don't do. Number one, if you go out to eat, you're not going to eat left-handed. Eating left-handed is considered dirty for sanitary reasons, for what the purposes that they use their left hand for. And the same principle would apply when shaking hands. We have, for example, I'm left-handed, so I eat left-handed. But also, when I shake hands, sometimes if I'm trying to be more friendly, I guess, I'll reach out with both hands and I'll grab the outside of the other hand with my left hand, and that would be a huge foul in the Middle East. I learned a hard lesson several years ago when I was working for a manufacturing company, trying to order parts from Germany. And most Europeans, when they go on holiday, the whole plant shuts down. The whole organization will shut down, and they'll do that between June and August, mostly July and August. So me being a new guy going into this organization, as we're trying to expand, we're trying to go global. We've been shipping to Mexico and Canada. So we were needing some manufactured parts from Germany. So I placed the order in July, expecting them to be arriving sometime early, mid-August, and only to find out when I started calling in August, the phone kept ringing and no one answered the phone, and that's because the whole plant had shut down, and I didn't get my parts until September, maybe early October, and that was the due date for the machine that was I was building. The other things, simple things like shipping pieces from us to other places around the world, I learned it's relatively easy to ship things to Mexico and Canada, but try to ship something to Israel, try to ship a machine from the United States to Israel, and it becomes quite a challenge. So I went about 3 minutes over what I really expected to do, so thank you for being patient, and look forward to seeing your comments on your post.